Welcome, everybody, to Lunch with Dodie. And today I'd like to welcome our wonderful musician friend, Jon Deshler. Jon has graciously agreed to be our guest today, and he's going to tell us all the fabulous things he's been doing during this COVID year to reach out to folks with his music. Thank you, Jon, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dodie. I don't know if you know much about me, but I started out in the San Fernando Valley as a teenage trumpet student and jazz photographer. So in the 70s, I taught myself black and white 35 millimeter photography to the extent that a teenager could, process my own film, and I'd go out because of where I was. I would get luminaries, your Count Basie's, Joe Williams, a lot of the big names that would come into town. And then, of course, all of the stellar studio musicians, a lot of those guys represented by, for example, the personnel of the Johnny Carson Tonight Show, Doc Severinsen Band, all of which who lived around me in the San Fernando Valley. I was born in Santa Ana, but I grew up in North Hollywood, which was not far from the Burbank studios. So some of Doc's band, lived not that far from me. These were the LA studio musicians. For all intents and purposes, the best musicians in the world. Because they're the guys who had to come in and on a quick dime, read the music, interpret it, play it perfectly, if not the first time, certainly the second time, and walk out and collect their check for Hollywood and all of the media of LA in the last 100 years. Between the time I was 14 and 21, on a shoestring paper route budget, I shot over 40 gigs in and around Los Angeles, driving around in my Volkswagen. Most of my friends were going to Cheap Trick concerts, but I was going to hear Super Sax or Freddie Hubbard or Chet Baker or whatever. Why? Because of my extreme interest in that music, right? That music was kind of my savior as a teenager, and the horn. It included the first Playboy Jazz Festival at the Hollywood Bowl. I was 16 years old. I had a high school buddy who was an usher and snuck me in like 3 hours before the thing started, and I had a little graphic arts shop photographer pass that I had made, and I just walked around the bowl for like 10 hours. Bill Cosby was the MC, Lionel Hampton Band, Weather Report with Jaco Pastorius and Wayne Shorter, on and on and on. But anyway, so all that led to me going to a visual arts college in Los Angeles called the Pasadena Art Center College of Design, a very respectable design school. And it was when I went there, it was very high end. They produced a lot of art directors, product designers, graphic designers, Ford, Dodge, GM. They all give that school tons of money. And then in the basement studios at that time, it's above the Rose Bowl in the hills. You got these 3D designers making models out of clay of things that look like maybe a modern Ferrari or something like that. And I went to that school. I went to Cal State Northridge for a couple years. And then I transferred to that school. And so I did it in just under 3 years. And in the middle of it, I got a client, Verdugo Hills Hospital in La Cañada, Montrose, California. So I kind of worked my way through the end of school. And long story short, 2 years after I graduated, I moved to Portland and opened up my own commercial photography studio in Southeast Portland. And all the time I'm playing, but I'm playing less and less because I'm shooting more and more. And one of my first major clients in Portland was, guess who? The Oregon Symphony. For 3 years, I shot almost all of their photos, all of their program covers, and all of their marketing. It was more of an editorial design kind of a photography job, but it was good for me at the time. 1 year, I took all the principal musicians out on location. So I took Michael Foxman out into the lobby of the Schnitzer. I took Leos, the guy who was the principal violinist who looked like Einstein, and I took him out to Crown Point, and he's holding up his violin like this on a stormy day, and I got a strobe with a softbox and a Honda generator, and I'm doing it up like Annie Leibovitz. So within 5 years, I was really doing something in Portland. I ended up working for everybody in this state: Intel, Infocus, HP, Kaiser, Permanente. For years, I did a bunch of Kaiser work. There's billboards that you would recognize. When they started doing that under one roof, all under one roof campaign, that was all my photography. In that era, while I'm also, married and having babies and have my 6 acres and Milano and blah, blah, blah. I'd just go out when my film was drawing and I'd turn on KMHD, the jazz station, and play 1 or 2 tunes. I had no facility because I was a hack at that point. I didn't practice. But I do it to kind of just keep my brain engaged. I give you all this background because it's relevant to where I'm kind of going in the foreground. And long story short, life happened, and we don't need to go into all that stuff. You can imagine. The evolution of one's brain and one's heart is an amazing thing. So I've had these 2 loves. They both started and were facilitated with my dysfunctional mentors, my parents, my father, my grandparents. I got a 35mm Argus rangefinder out of my grandfather's closet when I was like 10 or 11 and started playing with that. Then my dad helped me get a little darkroom together and ultimately gave me his Minolta SR7. So both of which are 35mm. This was the very, very early 70s, like the earliest 70, 71, 72. And I started the trumpet when I was 11. Those 2 loves, ironically, became the rest of my life. And ultimately, the most recent incantation goes like this. Parents are gone, kids are grown up, solo time. What do you do with the rest of your life? In my case, human development has become a real issue and study. And so I feel like that's the rest of my life's work, is to propagate my feelings about the validity and value of every little baby brain and how the whole country should really do a little bit better in all of our rich modernity on behalf of every baby brain. Again, another subject, but it does inform everything that I do. As of the time I was 57 last January, I had achieved literally turning my horn into a second career. For 5 years I had played at Silverton's Wine Bar and Bistro with my own jazz trio. First year was every Saturday night. The last 4 years it was every first Saturday night of every month. Brought down many Portland luminary jazz musicians, well-respected people of the likes of which who play with like Diana Ross and stuff like that. And I was so heartwarmed of my success because the last few years I was able to dedicate some time and focus to the thing and the proper practice, you might say, of your old embouchure, right? Which is a good metaphor for one's brain, I would say. And so can you imagine, by that time, last January, I had 5 steady gigs a month with my own jazz trio, every Friday night in Portland at Hobo's Restaurant and Lounge. And we were playing in Silverton, and we were playing all over. I was starting to pick up, so I was working like 7, 8 nights a month as a B+, A- jazz musician, second tier, second string, in the Mid-Willamette Valley, not really competing with anybody, but cultivating something out here, right? And then it all went kaput. And you know, in order to ensure and protect and back up my scenario of becoming not only the published photographer for over 3 decades, but now the working musician, and having been reinforced by a lot of the words and indications locally, I pursued my Oregon-sanctioned substitute teacher license so that I could start subbing 8 days a month in the local schools, and I got that in the email an hour before the governor closed the schools on March 5th. So here I was, last March. I had become a working musician, achieved my childhood dreams in my 50s as a second career. I was just blown away, phenomenal. Appreciated everybody's support and you know, it was just, you know, it was a really wonderful thing. And then kaput. And then COVID. And then what's going on? And how long is it going to go on? And, well, I have a little insight. My brother's a PhD of molecular biology. His specialty was RNA. He's a program director at the National Science Foundation. So I'm processing things with him and in Virginia and thinking about things. And I think, if you may recall, it was like literally the last week of last March. It was pretty damn dismal until a couple of those days in the last week of last March. And I was so frustrated by everything that was going on, which has traditionally been a big stimulant to my creativity. Don't want to be frustrated a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit. And I was thinking about all my friends, Sherry Arbuckle Hoffman and Lou and Rita and all these people from the Wednesday night dinners that I know, and just all my friends who would come see me at the wine bar when we were playing regularly and everything. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're all, first of all, not to be blunt or insensitive about it, but they're all a slight, not quite a generation older than me, right? So they're all at least 10 years older than me, maybe a little bit more. And I knew they were going to be safe and staying out. I'm like, oh my God, they're not even going to be able to go look at the tulips. They're going to miss one of the reasons I live here, which is the spring. So I got on one of those sunny afternoons, I got on my bike with my flugelhorn on the back of my, strapped onto my thing, had my handy dandy Galaxy S9, state of the art, but can't beam me up, Scotty, kind of an orientation. I went right over there to the Wooden Shoe Tulip Farm. Guess what? I had shot an Oregon Symphony program cover there about 30 years ago. I worked out that symphony program cover with her 30 years ago when there was nothing going on there but a dirt strip going between the field. I don't know if y'all
remember that.
Remember that. And I took the principal cellist out there and did one day, and I was kind of disappointed because it was really a dark, moody day, But the flowers were great and whatever, and we got a shot. I'm pulling up on the motorcycle 10 months ago now, and I'm looking, I says, barb around, because I think I exchanged some emails with her and told her, and they're very media friendly. So sure enough, I ride my dual sport Kawasaki 650 into the middle of the field and pull it off. I had brought a stand that I could clip my phone on. And I pull my horn out, and of course there's some laborers working in the field, and it was a beautiful sunny afternoon. Remember, that's key, right?
Yes.
And I sat there, I said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I said, maybe I'm doing this for my friends, wherever, everybody who's worried, and just try, whatever, this is what I do. So what did I do? So I combined my photography by making the video. This was for people, I was trying to bridge the gap between the 2 dimensions and the 3 dimensions. Awesome. That was really what I was trying to do. I then went to the Abbey. Same thing. I think it was a different day. And I played by myself. I walked up the steps and played under one of the cypress trees with the church in the back. It's a really pretty shot, right? And I think I'm like, what do I play? Oh, are they going to kick me out? Oh, is it sacrilegious? Whatever. I come up with Pennies from Heaven. That's what I needed at that point. I needed Pennies from Heaven. Hey, maybe somebody will come out of the woodwork and say, hey, we want you, young man, and whatever. And whatever, I made another little video. Then my guitar player, the illustrious, illuminating, insightful, incomparable guitar player, Neil Grandstaff, who lives in Albany, who's played with everybody between here and Seattle for over 50 years, and has become a faithful compatriot of mine. So I finally got him to join me one day. Another sunny day, was probably in April, in my truck this time instead of on the motorcycle, because he's 70. So he and I go to the tulip farm, do exactly the same thing, beautiful, and the little workers and everybody was kind of loving it. Sunny morning. And then we went to the Abbey the same day, and by the time he and I were under a little tree up at the top there, people were coming out. A gal from the administrative office by the old print shop cafe over there was, like from 100 yards away, because she was being really cautious. How about, win the Saints? I'm like, of course. And so we made a couple videos. And then it just started evolving, and it became Tune Tours. I ended up going to over 25 locations. By the end of June, my son, a working professional piano player in New Orleans on Bourbon Street, decided to give up there because they asked him to come back to work for no pay. So he took me up on my idea of saying, dude, take a summer vacation. This is last summer, right? It's COVID summer. What are we doing, So he did, and he ended up here for about 3.5 weeks. Now what am I going to do? He's a piano player. I've already got now my guitar player and bass player joining me. Advantage of those 3 instruments is we can literally go anywhere a couple old guys can drive and walk. Right. And so guess what? I have a Ford F-250 1996 diesel 4x4. And there's free pianos all over Craigslist.
Oh, we get calls all the time for wanting to donate pianos.
And then we ended up going north of Lake Oswego and picking up this beautiful piano. It was a gorgeous upright. That piano lived in the back of my trunk truck for 4 months. I played with 6 other piano players besides my son at a total of 25 different locations, which of course some of those were not with piano players.
Right.
I think it was the middle of June or July or August, I had gotten us on Coin 6 News 5 times in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And that piano I managed to get out, I think it was the last week of September. It is now sitting in Your Break Tavern.
Oh.
It's not in as good a shape as it was, but it's still a nice piano.
Yeah.
And I could go on for at least 3 hours about the stories that I could tell you of my encounters along the way doing these tune tours in the first COVID summer. We went from Newport to the Rose Gardens to Brownsville, me and my guitar player, little girls riding by their bicycles trying to give us $1 after staring at us. I'm like, oh my God. And the homeless people who came out of the park in Newport, on the other side of Newport, looking back at the bridge, and they come out and they're just beaming, and then they hand us $20.
Oh, that's awesome.
There was story after story after story like that this experience did to me, which kind of just reinforced my whole sense of purpose and mission, because I really think it's something that the community needs at large, and I'm prepared to do it again to some extent this next season, depending on how things go. I'm being the producer, the director, the lighting guy, the camera guy, the sound guy, the trumpet player who has to know the melody, and also, incidentally, occasionally I play a jazz solo. What does that mean? I'm inventing it in the moment. That's what it means. It may or may not be good, but I'm doing it, I'm taking what I get, because why? I'm on the fly doing a tune tour. So yeah, we went to Stonehenge. My son and I went to the Alvord Desert, played for this famous artist called John Simpkins. Look him up on Facebook. The guy's phenomenal. We ended up getting hired and waylaid by the guy who owns the Dayville Mercantile, which is just this side of John Day. So we ended up spending 2 nights there, but we made like $500 because we made over $100 one night playing in the campground for an hour. The next day he gave us like $300 and a big bottle of whiskey and all kinds of stuff and tips. I've always been this way, but now more than ever, we have to come up with ingenuity to bridge these gaps that we're talking about. And that requires this, which is what you're doing, which is why I said yes immediately. Yes. Because I care about and serve this local area to some extent to the best of my ability, but I do find it frustrating, and I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way. But you would think in the smaller communities it would be that much easier to do this. And that's not necessarily so. People, and I understand it, people of different generations and stuff, they're in different stages of life, they're doing different things. But what I would like to say towards the end of this whole thing is that everybody needs to start looking at any assets in completely new ways. And that's what I am doing with the rest of my life. I'm modeling it and talking about it, and those smiles and the dollar bills and the just the joyful, and people even dancing when we went all over the state and played the music spontaneously. None of that stuff was planned. It was pop-up kind of stuff, right? It was always weather contingent, and if my musician buddies were available, and everything had to come together. It was phenomenal to see the responses of the people, which is why I'm so passionate even now about it, even though I didn't, get the big money. And so I'm doing my best, even beyond my own genre. My genre is the Great American Songbook, right? Yep. My strength is I know about 100 to 200 songs that you would have heard Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, Nat King Cole, or Ella Fitzgerald, or Billie Holiday sing, right? That's my focus with the trumpet and the flugelhorn. And I love it dearly, and I think there's tremendous value in that Great American Songbook. Right.
Well, Jon, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. And I want folks to make sure they check out your tune tours on YouTube. Thank you, everybody. You guys have a great Friday and a wonderful weekend.